The town slept beneath a blanket of silence, as though the snow itself pressed down on every rooftop, muffling breath and noise. At 5 a.m., the Atlantic coast lay shrouded in gray-blue darkness. The horizon looked bruised, caught between night and dawn. Fresh snow crunched clean, unmarked across sidewalks, the schoolyard, the salt-bitten driveways. Winter there did not feel gentle. It carried the harsh, briny edge of ocean wind and pine sap. In the back lot of Havenbrook Elementary School, an engine hummed against the cold. Headlights cast pale cones across rows of sleeping yellow buses. Their paint dull from salt, their mirrors frosted opaque. They sat heavy and quiet, vehicles waiting for life. Engines that would roar awake at 7 to ferry nearly 400 children on their morning routes. For now, though, the only sound in the world was the steady crunch of boots over frozen asphalt. Officer Ethan Cole pulled his collar up as the cold chewed at the exposed skin of his neck. At 36, he carried himself with the steady stillness of someone who had seen life at its worst and clawed back sanity through force of will. Broad-shouldered, disciplined, gray eyes calm but always evaluating. 10 years military, city deployments, 2 tours attached to an MPK-9 unit overseas. The kind of man trained not only to patrol but to read danger like a second language. And beside him padded Shadow. 5 years old, a German shepherd whose black and tan coat gleamed even beneath frost. Powerful, controlled, trained down to the twitch of an ear. Shadow was a partner, not a pet. The bond ran deeper. Trained signals, unspoken trust, long hours of drills. Every patrol, every late-night walk through the snow-coated streets of Havenbrook, Shadow was there, breathing quietly, scanning. Loyal to one person. Loyal to Ethan. It was routine now. Ethan always swung the cruiser around to the schools on pre-dawn patrol. The police department didn't require it, but old instincts whispered at him that bad things like to hide where no one looked. So he checked. Always. Check them all, bud, Ethan murmured. Shadow's body tensed in response. His nose pressed low, weaving between bumpers, his inhale deep and crisp in the air. The shepherd patted methodically. Bus number 4, nothing. Bus number 8, nothing. Frost clung to wheel wells. Shadows shifted from the lamplight. Ethan's boots crunched steadily behind him. Then, bus number 12. Shadow froze. His form stiffened, eyes sharp. The silent language between man and dog was immediate. Ethan slowed, pulse hitching. The shepherd's body went tighter, tail rigid, ears upright. Then, Shadow ducked low beneath the front bumper. A growl crawled from his throat. Not playful, not inquisitive. This was warning. Deep, low. The kind of growl no handler ignores. Ethan's hand brushed the grip of his holstered sidearm, not because a bullet would help, but because instinct tethered him there. Shadow, he said carefully. The dog backed half out, ears erect, pupils hard, then gave a sharp bark. Just one. Not frantic. Alert. A signal etched into training. Explosive. Ethan's throat tightened. He dropped to one knee, beam of his tactical flashlight slashing beneath the bus chassis. There it was, bolted to the steel frame behind the front axle. Matte black, neat wiring taped tight, a red digital face staring brazen in the dark. The numbers clicked downward relentlessly. 15957, 015956. It didn't even matter how small it looked. The device was real. Live. Counting down. Ethan rose slowly. His heartbeat slammed against his ribs, but his movements stayed measured, stripped of panic. His training carried him like muscle memory. Radio mic clipped at his shoulder. Dispatch Officer Cole, he said, voice level, crisp. Location, Havenbrook Elementary Bus Yard. I have a confirmed explosive alert. K9 detection positive. Active timer visible. We have a live bomb under bus number 12. The acknowledgement came back instant, edgy static slicing his ear. The urgency in his tone allowed no second guess. Copy that, Cole. Weapon threat confirmed. All units redirect. Lockdown procedures now. Ethan pressed, his voice firm, clipped. No buses leaving this yard. No students arriving. Lock a 1-block perimeter minimum. Snow began drifting again from the sky in thin, spiraled flakes, falling between his boots and Shadow's crouched body. Shadow was pacing again, but not at the chassis now. Something else had struck his attention. The shepherd's eyes flicked sharp to the inner fender well. He pawed deliberately, low whine in his throat. Ethan bent, sweeping light again. There, black tape stuck flush against the curve. Something glinted dully, a slim USB flash drive wedged into place. Good boy, Ethan murmured, pulling it out, tucking it deep into his jacket pocket. Whoever planted this didn't just leave a device. They left a message. Or evidence. Or bait, a voice split the cold. Officer Cole? He turned. Marcy Bell, the night watchwoman, was crossing with her thermos clutched white-knuckled in one hand. 58 and wiry, with cropped gray curls and heavy glasses fogging from her breath. A retired bus driver. She'd supervised this yard for a decade and a half. I heard Shadow. "What's going on?" Her face stopped. She saw Ethan's stance. Saw Shadow motionless on high alert. And the faint blink of red beneath the bus. She staggered backward. "Is that— Oh my God!" "Marcy," Ethan said sharply, voice calm but firm. "Back. Stay behind the line. Do not come closer. We have an active explosive." Her mouth trembled, but her instincts pushed her hand into her parka pocket for her phone. I'm calling Nina. She needs to know— Nina Bell. Reporter. Field anchor from WBK. Known for shoving cameras closer than anyone. TV's front row seat to every breaking story in county. Ethan didn't bother telling Marcy to stop. He heard radio units already buzzing. It was public. Within 10 minutes, the echo of sirens broke the cold silence. Cruiser lights bled blue and red across the snow. And then, the deep growl of the bomb squad van. Out stepped Lieutenant Paul Hanley, 42, tall and lean. His vest thick but movement swift. Skin dark against the snow, eyes ringed with tired circles but locked sharp. On his hip, a loaded case of tools. On his chest, the heavy crest of explosives ordnance. "Cole," Hanley said briskly, not wasting breath. "You the spotter?" Ethan nodded toward Shadow. Shadow was under the axle front. "Timer's running." Less than 2 hours. Hanley's jaw tightened once. He snapped his hand to his team, who spilled out behind him like clockwork. Perimeter tape rose yellow against snow, specialists unfolding robot tracks, adjusting armored gloves. "You bought us minutes," Hanley said low but clear. "That'll matter. Maybe enough." Shadow crouched in the snow, amber eyes locked on Ethan. Waiting. Silent. Loyal. Like he knew. He had started a clock much louder than the one ticking under bus 12. Behind the tape, Marcy clutched her phone, whispering rapid fire into it. The glow of headlights revealed WBK's van parking crooked just beyond the block. A camera lens already telescoping, red record lights snapping alive. The story was no longer theirs alone. But Ethan didn't look back toward the press, not once. His eyes stayed forward, on the machine that hissed down its ramp. The tracked robot crawling forward toward the black box beneath bus Samara 12. The air tightened like a fist. The morning was only beginning, and the clock was already running out. Timer confirms 1 hour 47 minutes. But this isn't crude. Whoever built this had training military, or paramilitary layers of shielding false leads could take most of that time just to map the circuit. Any sign of a remote trigger? Not yet. But we're treating it as both timed and manually capable. Ethan thought of the USB in his pocket. It might be a distraction, or it might be a clue. He walked back to his cruiser, plugged the device into his rugged duty laptop, and waited. The screen blinked once, then a folder opened. Inside, a single video file titled "Message for You." MP4. Ethan hesitated, then double-clicked. The screen flickered and showed the image of a man seated in a dark room. Only part of his face was visible. Middle-aged, pale, glasses, clean-shaven. His voice was quiet, calm, and unmistakably deliberate. "This is just the beginning," the man said. "They thought they could erase me. They thought their secrets would stay buried. But the children, oh, the children must be made to feel what I felt. And you, Officer Cole, you will be my witness." The file ended. Ethan stared at the screen, knuckles white. He'd never seen this man before, but the implication was chilling. This wasn't random. This was planned, personal, and he was now part of the game. Outside, Hanley's voice came through again. "We're starting the probe, but this will be delicate. Might want to start looking for who'd want to send a message like this." Ethan stepped out of the cruiser, the early sunlight now pushing dimly through the gray sky. His breath hung in the air. Shadow returned to his side. Somewhere in this town, someone had built that bomb and left behind a digital breadcrumb trail. And Ethan knew this wasn't over. Back at Havenbrook PD's temporary command post set up near the cordoned off school lot, Ethan sat inside the mobile forensics van, the hum of computers filling the tight space. The USB Shadow had found was now being mirrored and decrypted by the department's tech specialist, Logan Tai, a 29-year-old of mixed Asian descent. Wiry build with square glasses and a habit of speaking fast when nervous. Dressed in a hoodie under a department-issued vest, Logan had been pulled from his day off and didn't seem too thrilled, though the excitement in his eyes betrayed his curiosity. "Got something?" Logan muttered, tapping his keyboard. "That video wasn't all. There's an encrypted folder, cracked using a hash match old school stuff. Whoever did this wanted someone to find it, but not too easily." Ethan leaned in. "What's inside?" "Personnel files, scans, emails, and wait photos." This is weird. Logan clicked through a series of blurry surveillance images. A man in a long winter coat was seen walking the school perimeter over the past 2 months. Always at night, always alone. One frame caught him staring at the very same bus where the bomb was found. Then Logan opened a PDF. At the top of the file, Leonard Briggs, termination report, Havenbrook School Board. Ethan's jaw tightened. Leonard Briggs. That name was familiar. He scrolled through the report. Once the revered principal of Havenbrook Elementary, Briggs had been dismissed 4 years ago after multiple allegations surfaced: verbal abuse, coercive punishments, even the misappropriation of school funds. A cover-up had nearly succeeded until several brave teachers broke ranks. Ethan skimmed the list of whistleblowers, stopping at one name, Rachel Moore. He remembered seeing her name in one of the articles when he first transferred to Havenbrook. Shadow, who had been quietly lying beneath the desk, perked up and gave a low whine. Ethan glanced at him. "You remember that name too, don't you, buddy?" he murmured. Logan flipped to another file. This is even more concerning. Maintenance logs from 2 years ago. Briggs signed out keys for the district vehicle yard. Said it was for campus safety checks. Never returned them. That's how we got access to the buses. Ethan stood. "I need to speak to Rachel Moore. She wasn't hard to find." Rachel Moore, 34, was the art and literature teacher at Havenbrook Elementary. Tall with an earthy grace and deep auburn hair, usually tied in a loose knot. She dressed simply, a long dark coat and jeans with worn boots. Her eyes were intelligent but tired, as if she carried memories that never quite let her rest. She met Ethan outside the school library, where she had spent the morning helping redirect arriving staff and students away from the crime scene. "Detective Cole," she asked cautiously. Her voice was steady but guarded. "Officer Ethan is fine," he replied. "I need to ask you about Leonard Briggs." She sighed, arms folding. "I figured it might come back to him. You were one of the teachers who testified." "I was the first," she corrected, chin lifting slightly. Hair retaliated against anyone who spoke up. "One of our aides had her car set on fire. Nothing was ever proven, of course." Ethan nodded slowly. "We believe Briggs may be behind this attack. I need any documentation you kept. Anything that might tie him to the bus lot?" Rachel's brow furrowed. "Give me a moment." She returned 10 minutes later with a thick manila folder yellowed at the corners. Inside were old reports, notes from other staff, and one document that made Ethan pause: a maintenance access log from back when Briggs was still employed. This shows Briggs frequently visited the Bizyard. Claimed he was checking for vandalism, but the same buses, bus 12 included, kept getting noted. "Odd tire pressure, scratched undercarriages. You kept all of this." "I never trusted the internal board to keep our complaints safe," she said quietly. "I didn't know if one day we'd need to prove why we acted." Ethan placed the folder into his bag. "You might have just saved hundreds of lives." They walked together out to the edge of the lot where Shadow sat waiting. As they neared the cruiser, Shadow stood up and sniffed the air, then moved suddenly toward the edge of the lot, nose to the ground. "Shadow!" Ethan called. The dog barked once, then again, this time deeper. He had picked up something. Ethan followed, Rachel at his side. Shadow led them across the street, through a patch of dead winter grass, and toward an old chain-link fence. Beyond it sat an abandoned warehouse. Windows boarded, but its side lots scattered with old fuel drums and mechanical debris. Ethan climbed the fence, Rachel staying behind. Shadow sniffed along a pile of metal and stopped near a large plastic container taped shut. Ethan opened it cautiously. Inside, empty fuel cans, stained rags, and another piece of tape matching the kind used to secure the USB. Rachel called from behind the fence. "What is it?" "A stash," Ethan said grimly. "He's been using this spot to prep." Shadow picked up the scent from the USB and tracked it here. He pulled out his phone and called it in. Back at the command post, Logan confirmed something chilling. The USB had a GPS metadata embedded in the video file. It pinged from this warehouse 2 nights ago. Everything was coming together. The timeline, the motive, the man. Ethan looked up at the overcast sky as flakes of snow began to fall again. "We're not just hunting a bomber," he said aloud. "We're hunting a man who feels like the whole town abandoned him." The cold didn't let up as the morning deepened in Havenbrook. Thin flurries of snow had begun to stick to the sidewalks, dusting the town in white, disguising danger beneath an innocent veil. At the edge of the industrial district, tucked behind rows of vacant warehouses and forgotten equipment, sat an old scrapyard, once a junk hub for city vehicles. Now silent and sprawling like a rusted graveyard. Ethan Cole stood just inside the perimeter, the crunch of ice beneath his boots the only sound besides Shadow's soft panting. His gloved hand rested near his holster as he surveyed the area. Chain-link fences sagging under the weight of snow, rows of gutted school buses, tangled metal parts piled high like skeletal ruins. He wasn't alone this time. With him was Sergeant Luis Navarro, 42, a stocky Puerto Rican with a thick beard and tactical vest. He spoke with a Brooklyn edge, walked with military precision, and had been leading tactical units since before Ethan ever joined the force. His eyes, though alert, carried a weariness that came from seeing too many close calls go sideways. 2 other members of the Havenbrook PD Tactical Response Unit flanked them. Officer Dana Kim, 31, Korean-American, lean and focused, her breath fogging up her ballistic goggles. And Officer Roy Matz, 37, heavy-set and quiet, a former firefighter turned EOD-trained patrol officer. "Scrapyard was shut down last spring," Navarro said, scanning the horizon. "Owner died, no heirs, nobody checks this place anymore." Ethan nodded, then gave Shadow a hand signal. The German Shepherd's posture shifted immediately, ears up, nose low, weaving between debris piles with careful steps. His breaths were short, steady, each movement purposeful. A dog trained not just for obedience, but for survival. They made their way deeper inside into a dim corridor formed by stacked bus frames and engine blocks. The metallic scent of rust mingled with oil, and there, barely noticeable, under a collapsed tarp, was a plastic crate covered in frost, its edges stained with soot. Shadow halted, his body tensed. Then a short bark, 2 beats. Ethan stopped mid-step. "Trap," he said sharply. "Back." Navarro signaled the others to hold position. Shadow moved slowly, circled the crate, then laid down his trained alert signal for explosive detection. "Mathers," Ethan called. The EOD trained officer approached, squatted beside the crate, and lifted a flap of tarp with a gloved hand. Beneath the plastic cover, a thin wire stretched taut between a detached pressure plate and a small device hidden under an old lawnmower part. "Daisy chain rig," Mathers muttered. "Would have taken out half theired." "Shadow just saved our lives," Navarro breathed. Ethan knelt beside his partner, rubbing his head gently. "Good boy." Once the device was marked and deactivated, the team continued clearing the rest of the yard. It was Officer Dana Kim who found the next piece. "Sir?" she called, standing beside a rusted bus shell. Inside, wedged between the back seats, was a large rolled-up document wrapped in weatherproof plastic. Ethan took it, unrolled it against the bus wall. It was a detailed diagram of Havenbrook's school bus routes. Not a standard district map, but torn with marks, times, color codes, and notes scrolled in faded black marker attached with a paperclip. A printed list of names. Ethan scanned it, a full student manifest. "All the elementary kids on the morning routes," he said, voice tight. Navarro frowned. "He's not just targeting a school. He's targeting specific buses." Shadow barked again, this time from behind the wheel arch of a gutted van. Ethan rushed over and saw the dog pawing at a metal toolbox with a partially open lid. Inside, a second remote detonator unit, more advanced than the first, with a multi-trigger interface. "Multiple devices," Ethan muttered. He wasn't relying on just one. At that moment, Ethan's radio crackled. "Officer Cole, it's Marcy," came the voice from the other end. Ethan stepped away and answered. "Marcy, what's wrong?" The voice on the line was tremulous. I got a text message just now. Blocked number said if I talk to anyone again, I won't live to see the sunrise." Ethan's chest tightened. "Where are you now?" "At my place, locked in. But I'm scared, Ethan. This feels real. I'll have someone dispatched immediately. Keep the doors locked. Don't answer to anyone but Uniform." He hung up and turned to Navarro. "We need a unit watching Marcy's place. She's being threatened." "On it." Navarro nodded, already radioing in the request. Ethan turned to Shadow, who was sitting beside the detonator, eyes still fixed on it. "This guy isn't acting out of desperation," he said. "He's working a plan, one layer at a time, and we're not even close to the core yet." They bagged the route map, the detonator, and the student list, and filed out of the yard. Snow was falling heavier now, muffling their footsteps, coating even the darkest stains with a deceptive whiteness. Ethan cast one last look at the rusted scrapyard behind him. Somewhere out there, Leonard Briggs was watching, calculating, waiting. But so were they, and this time they had a German shepherd with a nose for vengeance, and a heart that beat only for the safety of others. The wind had picked up again in Havenbrook, hissing through alleyways and tugging at frost-coated windows like a warning whisper. The streetlights blinked in the early hours. Shrouded in a fog so thick it dulled even the sharpest silhouette. Somewhere between 4 and 4:15 a.m., a camera mounted on an aging utility pole flickered briefly and caught a figure emerging from a dimly lit building. It was Leonard Briggs. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but the timestamp was unmistakable, and the figure's gait stiff on the left leg from an old injury-matched Briggs' known profile. He wore a dark hooded jacket and moved with the precision of a man who knew every corner of the neighborhood. The address, Maple Lane Motel, an old brick building with cracked paint and a neon vacancy sign that hadn't worked in years. Ethan Cole stood at the Havenbrook PD operations desk, reviewing the footage on loop. He wore a black thermal underlayer beneath his police jacket, dark jeans, and his badge clipped to his belt. His eyes were rimmed red from lack of sleep, but his mind was sharp. Beside him stood Captain Denise Harlow, 50, and a nonsense woman with short-cropped gray hair and years of field experience behind her. She was dressed in a heavy brown trench coat, thick scarf, and boots suited for the winter terrain. Her voice, usually calm, carried urgency. If Briggs was there at 4 a.m., she said, he's still nearby. He wouldn't risk travel before sunrise. Ethan nodded. That motel's only 4 blocks from the school district garage. He could walk it blind. They both looked down at the item on the desk. A discarded jacket found near the scrapyard perimeter during the sweep. It was a padded coat, old dark green, and reeking faintly of gasoline and industrial grease, likely left behind in haste. Ethan glanced at Shadow, who sat alertly by his side. Let's see what you can find. Shadow was already pacing, tail stiff, nose twitching. Ethan leaned down, gave a simple command. Track. The German Shepherd lowered his snout to the jacket and inhaled deeply. A beat passed. Then he pivoted toward the door without hesitation. Captain Harlow raised an eyebrow. We'll follow your lead. The team, Ethan, Shadow, and 2 tactical officers, made their way through the sleeping streets following the dog's path. Snow crunched underfoot, and the quiet felt almost reverent. Shadow led them straight to the Maple Lane Motel. The front office was locked and unmanned as expected. Most rooms were rented weekly to seasonal workers or those avoiding attention. Ethan scanned the windows dark except one on the second floor where the curtain was slightly ajar. Shadow stopped at the base of the stairs, staring upward. Ethan drew his sidearm and exchanged a glance with Officer Dana Kim, who was on backup. She nodded. They moved in. Room 207. The hallway carpet was worn and musty. Walls yellowed from years of smoke and age. Ethan reached the door, tested the knob locked. He listened. Movement. Just a faint scrape of metal on wood. Then silence. He gestured to Dana. 3, 2, 1. They burst in. The room was empty. A broken window. Cold air pouring in. On the floor, a steaming cup of coffee half full. And on the bed, blueprints for what appeared to be another school bus, different from the first. Ethan rushed to the window and scanned the alleyway below. No sign of Briggs. Shadow was already circling the room, nose to the floor, tail rigid. Then he barked once and sat beside the bed. Ethan crouched and found a burner phone beneath the mattress. Its screen cracked but still in. One message displayed final stage. No mistakes. Wait for the broadcast. Before Ethan could process further, his radio buzzed. Cole, it's Rachel Moore. Something's happened. Ethan stood up. Go ahead. Rachel's voice was shaking. I just got an email. No subject. It said, truth always bites back. And there was an image attached of me standing outside my house this morning. He could hear her breathing fast. I haven't told anyone where I live since I moved. Not even my coworkers. Rachel, listen to me, Ethan said. You're safe. But I need you to forward that email now. We'll send an officer to your home. I'm scared, she whispered. I thought I was past all this, but he hasn't changed. Rachel Moore, 34, was a tall, fair-skinned woman with sharp features and quiet strength. A 5th-grade teacher at Havenbrook Elementary. She had once been Briggs's subordinate before helping expose his misconduct years ago. Since then she'd stayed low, never giving interviews, never returning to the spotlight. The trauma had left her guarded, but her will to protect children was unshaken. Ethan replied firmly, Your courage back then helped bring him down. Don't let fear silence you now. There was a pause, then a small, steady voice. Send someone. I'll talk. Back at them motel. Ethan packed up the blueprints and the burner phone. Shadow continued sniffing the floor until he let out another low growl near the radiator. Taped beneath it was a plastic envelope. Inside, a flash drive. Captain Harlow arrived moments later to take over scene management. He's still ahead of us, she said. But he's getting sloppy. This isn't about hiding anymore. He wants a confrontation. Ethan looked down at Shadow, and he's going to get one. As they exited the motel, the first pale streaks of dawn broke over Havenbrook, casting long shadows across the snow-draped sidewalks. But Ethan didn't feel the warmth of morning. Not yet. He had a suspect on the run, a growing web of threats, and a bomb he still hadn't found. And time was slipping fast. These streets of Havenbrook were soaked in a steel-blue hush, lit faintly by the glow of streetlights clinging to the last minutes of darkness. Frost laced the sidewalks, and the exhaust of early delivery trucks fogged the air like smoke drifting through an invisible war zone. It was 6:30 a.m. on a bitter winter morning, and the town's pulse was about to quicken in ways it hadn't in decades. Officer Ethan Cole had barely slept. His patrol jacket still bore the dust and scent of the previous night's warehouse raid. His eyes sharp despite the fatigue. His breath came out in steady clouds as he crouched behind a snow-dusted concrete barrier at the Hilltop Depot, a rarely used auxiliary school bus lot tucked behind a maintenance yard on the town's eastern edge. Next to him, Shadow crouched low, ears flat, muscles tense. The 5-year-old German Shepherd was silent but alert, nose pointed toward the row of idle buses stretching out ahead of them. Somewhere in that frosty labyrinth, Leonard Briggs was preparing to finish what he had started. The intel came from the flash drive found beneath the radiator in Briggs's motel room. Partial logs of GPS pings and a note. Second wave, Hilltop 6:30, rural route 8. That bus was scheduled to depart at 7:10 a.m., meant for children in the outskirts. Ethan checked his radio. Team Bravo in position. Bravo here. East exit covered Team Charlie. Set on perimeter. Awaiting your go. Ethan glanced around. Captain Harlow hadn't wanted him on the breach team, but Ethan insisted. He knew Briggs. He'd studied every angle of his bitterness, every inch of his broken pride. This wasn't a standard bomb plot, it was personal. Inside the depot, Leonard Briggs, 62, was crouched beneath a faded yellow school bus. His white hair was wild, unkempt, and clashed with the pristine navy utility vest he wore over a thermal shirt. His hands were gloved, but shaky, fumbling with wires and a black box blinking red. The night had not been kind to him. His face was gaunt, his lips dry, and a wildness danced in his eyes. He muttered to himself as he connected the last lead. They thought they could erase me. You watch Havenbrook. You watch what comes next. Unbeknownst to him, Tessa Lang, 27, was live on every major social media platform. A local journalist with sharp instincts and a sharper jawline, she stood with her phone raised behind a barricade near the entrance, live streaming the developing standoff. Tessa was Marcy's daughter, and she'd inherited none of her mother's quiet. Dressed in a bright orange park and jeans, she paced as her audience numbers climbed. Her voice quivered as she narrated, "Sources confirm police believe this is the same suspect from yesterday's near tragedy. No confirmation yet on the presence of explosives." But a rumble from Shadow broke her monologue. The German Shepherd sprang forward, cutting across the open space toward bus 18. Ethan shouted, "Shadow!" "What is it?" The canine halted just beside the left rear wheel, tail up, nose pressing along the base of the bus's undercarriage. He barked once, short, sharp, deliberate. Ethan rushed to him. There, taped within the wheel well, was a gray plastic box wired and humming faintly. Ethan's breath caught. "Command, we've got another device live, I repeat. Live device under bus 18. "Understood," came the voice over radio. "Disposal en route 95 minutes. But Ethan already knew they didn't have 5 minutes. Shadow stiffened again. A faint clicking sound echoed from within the bus. Then movement. Briggs stepped out from the bus's emergency door, holding a wireless detonator, thumb hovering over the button. His face was pale with determination, his voice ragged. "Don't come closer. It's over. You had your chance." The town had its chance. Ethan stepped forward slowly, hands raised. "Leonard, put it down. This isn't justice. It's just more pain. You think hurting these kids will bring you peace? They ruined me." Briggs shouted, his voice cracked and raw. "They let them lie. Took everything. I was a teacher. I built futures." Tessa's live stream caught the entire standoff. Her views zoomed in shakily as viewers began flooding the feed with comments hundreds per second. Across Havenbrook, parents sat frozen, watching on their phones as the fate of their children hung by a thread. Ethan kept his voice steady. "Leonard, you were more than your mistakes. But this will erase anything left of the man you were." Briggs hesitated. "You don't understand." And in that hesitation, Shadow moved. The German Shepherd launched forward in a blur of muscle and instinct, jaws clamping down on Briggs's wrist before he could press the trigger. The detonator flew from his grasp, clattering onto the snow-packed gravel. Ethan surged forward, tackled Briggs to the ground, and pinned him with practiced ease. Handcuffs snapped shut. Briggs didn't fight. He just lay still, breathing hard. It was 6:53 a.m. By the time the bomb squad arrived, the second device had been neutralized, and Shadow stood proud at Ethan's side, tail gently swaying. Captain Harlow approached moments later. "You and Shadow just saved this entire district." Ethan looked down at his partner. "He saved them. I just followed his lead." Across town, sirens faded. 100 buses rolled into their routes on time, and in homes where parents had been glued to screens, silent prayers were answered with tears and relief. Shadow barked once, not in alarm this time, but in pride. Havenbrook would be okay. The interrogation room at Havenbrook Police Department was quiet, lit only by the hum of flickering fluorescent lights. Ethan Cole sat across from Leonard Briggs, a steel table between them. The air inside was warmer than outside, but the tension carried a coldness no heater could dissolve. Briggs slouched in his chair, hands cuffed in front of him, eyes bloodshot but lucid. His gray beard was speckled with frost from the early morning arrest. Still wearing the navy thermal vest, he looked like a man who had walked away from everything years ago, and finally decided to return for vengeance. Ethan leaned forward, arms crossed. "Let's not waste time, Leonard. You had explosives under a school bus and another rig to blow. Why? Why go after children?" Briggs gave a slow, dry chuckle. "Not the children, the system, the parents, the cowards who destroyed me." Ethan kept his voice even. "Destroyed you or exposed you?" Briggs looked up, and for the first time his voice cracked. "I gave 24 years to that school. Built it from crumbling classrooms to one of the best districts in the county. I worked extra hours. I covered for staff shortages. I gave speeches, wrote grants. You know what I got in return?" He slammed his cuffed fists on the table, startling the young officer monitoring the feed through the two-way glass. "They turned on me. One anonymous complaint turned into 6, then 12. Parents whispering in board meetings, saying I was too strict, saying I was intimidating their kids." Ethan remained silent, letting him speak. Briggs's face twisted. "I disciplined students who needed discipline. I raised my voice, yes, but no child was ever harmed. Except for Theons who were," a voice said from the doorway. Rachel Moore entered escorted by a uniformed officer. She wore a gray cardigan over a collared blouse, jeans, and snow-dusted boots. Her hair was tied back, her face pale but composed. At 42, Rachel carried herself with a quiet strength. A veteran teacher at Havenbrook Elementary, she had been the first to report Briggs years ago. Ethan looked to Briggs. "You remember Rachel?" Briggs's face hardened. "Ah." The teacher turned martyr. Rachel stepped forward, her tone firm. "You humiliated kids, Leonard. Isolating them for hours, screaming inches from their faces. There were bruises on a 6-year-old boy's wrist. You crossed a line and you know it." Briggs leaned back, sneering. "You had a personal vendetta." "No," Rachel said, voice steady. "I had students coming to me crying. I had parents afraid to speak up. What we did was to protect them. You were never the victim." Ethan watched the exchange closely. Briggs's hands clenched and unclenched. His shoulders trembled, but he didn't lash out. "I lost everything," Briggs muttered. "My pension, my name, my house. Do you know what it's like to be erased?" "You did that to yourself?" Rachel replied softly. Silence stretched. Ethan finally stood. "Leonard, we found partial schematics for the second device on your flash drive, but we need to know if there are any more. How many other buses did you target?" Briggs shook his head. "Only the 2. That was enough to make a point." Ethan turned to the officer behind the glass. "Get the K-9 team to sweep the remaining depot buses again, and I want bomb squad confirmation on both devices." He left the room, motioning for Rachel to follow. In the hallway, Shadow was waiting. The dog sat near the vending machines, his fur still damp from the earlier snow, his eyes fixed on the interrogation room door. When he saw Ethan, his tail wagged once. Rachel crouched beside Shadow and stroked his head. "You saved them, didn't you?" "He saved all of us," Ethan replied. And an hour later, Shadow was deployed to recheck the remaining buses at Hilltop Depot. This time, he was joined by Officer Javier J. Mendoza, a 29-year-old explosives technician newly transferred from Boston. Jay wore a heavy-duty green bomb squad jacket and carried a compact remote scanner in one hand. He had a sharp wit and a reputation for staying calm under pressure. "Shadow leads, I follow," Jay said, giving the dog a nod. "Let's see if the old man left us any parting gifts." As Shadow sniffed the perimeter of another backup bus, one not scheduled for use that week, he suddenly halted at There Are storage hatch. His ears perked. Then he barked short and firm. Jay opened the hatch and shined a flashlight inside. "Ah, hell, we got a sealed crate taped." Shadow's nose knows. Inside the crate were 2 smaller blocks of CX wrapped in thick black plastic along with wires, a timer that hadn't been activated, and another detonator. This on wireless, clearly a contingency. Ethan, now watching via video feed, sighed. He had a third target. Rachel, seated nearby, looked up. "Which road is that one?" "West Ridge," Ethan answered grimly. "Middle school kids." Shadow's timely detection ensured those children would never be at risk. The explosives were safely removed and the bus grounded for inspection. Back at HQ, Briggs remained silent after learning the third device had been found. He didn't deny it. He just sat, staring blankly at the wall as if his war had been lost before it even began. Rachel left the precinct without a word to him. Outside, the snow had started falling again. Light, soft, quiet. Shadow watched her go, ears flicking, then turned back toward Ethan. Another job done, another day saved. The snow had stopped falling over Havenbrook, but the memory of that harrowing morning still lingered in the hearts of its people. It was 9 a.m. now, only 2 hours since the final threat had been neutralized. Yet the town was already moving, not in fear but in gratitude. City Hall, usually reserved for quiet administrative dealings, had become the epicenter of something beautiful. Children lined the wide stone steps, their small hands clutching hastily drawn thank you signs and paper flowers still damp with marker ink. At the center of it all, standing tall but humble, was Officer Ethan Cole. Ethan, 36, his winter patrol jacket, now neatly zipped and pressed, looked nothing like the man who had wrestled a bomb plot into submission just hours earlier. His short-cropped brown hair was still a little wind-tossed, and his storm-gray eyes scanned the crowd with disbelief. He had never been one for attention. A former military police officer who had transferred to Havenbrook PD just 8 months ago, Ethan preferred calm over commotion. But today he stood beside his partner, Shadow, and this wasn't about him. Shadow, the 5-year-old sable German shepherd, wore a fresh black vest adorned with a temporary gold medallion that read, Havenbrook's hero. His tail wagged steadily, ears alert, as a line of children took turns patting his back or whispering thank yous into his fur. He remained still, regal, his canine instincts never fully switching off even now. At the podium stood Mayor Linda Prescott, a tall, silver-haired woman in her late 60s, dressed in a dark blue wool coat and a matching beret. Her voice echoed clearly into the chilled air, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Today we recognize courage, not just the kind that stops evil in its tracks, but the kind that chooses to serve day after day without promise of reward. She turned toward Ethan and Shadow. Officer Cole, Shadow, this town owes you its children. Thunderous applause followed, mixed with tear-airy cheers. Ethan gave a short nod. Shadow barked once proudly. Near the front row stood Rachel Moore, wearing a gray trench coat and red scarf. Her eyes glistened with emotion as she clapped. Beside her, an easel displayed a new banner. K9 and Kids, Safety Through Trust, an initiative she and Ethan had dreamt up during the chaos, but finalized in the calm. Rachel, 34, elementary school teacher and survivor of trauma, had spent years believing her courage had done more harm than good. But now, watching the children cheer and the parents raise their phones to capture every moment, she knew she had chosen right both then and now. A few feet away, Marcy Whitaker, the 58-year-old security guard with her signature brown cap and green windbreaker, was being handed a framed certificate of civic honor by the police chief himself. Her hands trembled slightly, but her smile was unwavering. They told me I'd just be checking locks and watching cameras. She chuckled into the microphone when invited to speak. Nobody warned me that hitting send on a text could save a town, but I'd do it again. Laughter and applause broke the tension, finally letting the town breathe. Later that afternoon, Ethan and Rachel held the first public session for the K9 and Kids program at the Havenbrook Community Center. The space had been hastily decorated with balloons and safety posters, and already dozens of children sat on the gym mats, eyes wide with excitement as they waited to meet Shadow. Remember, Ethan began, kneeling beside Shadow. Not every dog wears a badge, but every dog deserves kindness, and every one of you has the power to help make our world safer. One small boy raised his hand. Even me, especially you, Ethan said, smiling. You listen, you notice things. That's where heroes begin. Shadow barked gently, then laid down so the kids could come closer. It wasn't long before laughter replaced fear, and learning took the place of confusion. The town had been tested, but the lesson hadn't ended in tragedy. I tended in transformation. As the sun dipped behind the hills that evening, turning the snowbanks golden pink, a bronze plaque was quietly affixed beside the steps of the Havenbrook Police Department. It read, To Shadow, the guardian who heard the unheard. To Ethan, the heart that listened. And to Havenbrook, for choosing courage. In a world where shadows can lurk, even in the most innocent places, it was a loyal dog and a quiet man who reminded us all courage doesn't always wear a cape. It sometimes walks on 4 legs, or kneels beside a child, or chooses to speak the truth when silence feels safer. Officer Ethan and Shadow didn't just stop a tragedy. They turned fear into faith and danger into a chance for healing. It was a miracle, not of lightning or thunder, but of small, steadfast acts of love, loyalty, and listening to the whisper of what's right. Maybe that's how God works. Not always through grand signs, but through people and animals placed exactly where they need to be, at the moment they're most needed. And maybe, just maybe, Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was an angel in fur, sent to remind us that faith walks beside us even in the darkest hours. So if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in second chances. Comment amen if you believe that God still sends his miracles in quiet, beautiful ways. Subscribe to our channel if you believe in loyalty, courage, and the power of love. And may God bless every viewer watching this. No matter where you are not alone.